Violet the Pilot by Steve Breen. Today we will read a fantasy story. It's a story that couldn't happen in real life. Look at the cover. What do you think this book will be about? What does a pilot do? Who do you think Violet is? One possible purpose for reading a fantasy is to be entertained by what the characters do, learn, and say. What do you want to know about Violet and her plane? What questions do you have about Violet and her plane? Use your questions to set a purpose for reading. Everyone in town knew that Violet Van Winkle was a little different. For starters, she and her parents lived in an odd-looking house next to the junkyard her father managed. And while other girls were playing with dolls and tea sets, Violet played with monkey wrenches and needle-nose pliers. Violet was a mechanical genius. By the time she was 2, she could fix almost any broken appliance in the house. By 4, she could take apart the grandfather clock and completely reassemble it. Since she didn't have any friends aside from her dog Orville, she would spend hours tinkering with things from the yard. Violet's parents were very proud of her, although they weren't too happy the time she put a lawnmower engine on her cousin's tricycle. What do you know about Violet? Use details from the text and pictures to tell what Violet looks like and how she acts. So think back to those external and internal traits. The older she got, the more interesting Violet's creations became. Around the time she turned 8, she was building elaborate machines from scratch. And not just any old machines. Flying machines. Her parents couldn't believe their eyes when they saw Violet zoom by for the first time. They were a little worried in the beginning, but they quickly saw that she was a pretty good pilot. "Careful not to hit the house," Violet's father would yell, "and put on a sweater," her mother would add. Violet used anything she could find in the junkyard to make her wonderful contraptions. There was the tub bubbler, the bicopter, the rocket can, the pogo plane, the slide glider, and the wingamajig, to name a few. Violet's engineering was pretty sound. The only real hazards were tall trees, piles of junk in the yard, and bugs in her teeth. Yuck! Kids at school would see Violet eating lunch alone and make fun of her strange books and greasy coveralls. Claude and Clyde Mulrooney were especially obnoxious. Then one day, Violet noticed a poster in the drugstore window. "Air Show, October 20th, it read. That's only 2 weeks away, Violet thought. Can kids fly in the show? Is homemade aircraft allowed? That night, Violet sat in her room thinking about the air show. She knew it would be a good feeling if one of her planes won a prize, and maybe then the kids at school would be nice to her. Violet pictured exactly where she would hang her blue ribbon. She and Orville spent the next few days combing the junkyard for just the right materials. When they had collected a giant pile of stuff, the building began. One day, the Mulrooney twins happened to pass by. "Look, it's that girl from school," one of them said. "What are you doing, weirdo?" "I'm building an airplane," she told them. The twins exploded in laughter, then mumbled something mean as they walked away. Orville barked at the boys, but Violet just went back to her project. "Take it easy, buddy," she said. "We're too busy to worry about them." Finally, after days of hard work, Violet had finished making her flying machine. She named the magnificent new craft the Hornet. "Wait till the people in the grandstand see me flying this," Violet said to Orville. The test flight was a success. On the day of the big air show, Violet took off, bursting with excitement. Her parents' faces had beamed with pride when they wished her luck, and she thought about that as she flew through the clear autumn sky. She calculated that the trip would take about 20 minutes. She would arrive just in time for the start of the show. Suddenly, something caught Violet's eye. In the river below, a group of people were waving frantically. Violet lowered her altitude to get a better look. A troop of Boy Scouts had run into trouble while canoeing. Violet knew she had to help, fast. It wasn't easy rescuing all the boys, but Violet piloted the Hornet with careful precision. Saving the Scoutmaster from going over the falls was particularly dangerous. Violet dropped the Grateful Scouts off at the hospital. Then she checked her watch. 3:30, she said to Orville sadly. We've missed the air show. She turned her plane toward home and sighed. It was a miserable feeling. How does missing the air show make Violet feel? Why do you think she might feel this way? That evening, Violet had no appetite for dinner. She just went upstairs and sat on her bed. All of a sudden, she heard lots of noise outside the house. She and Orville went to the window and discovered that a crowd of people had gathered. Somebody spotted her. "There's Violet," the boy shouted jubilantly. "There's our hero!" The Van Winkles stepped outside, squinting from all the flashbulbs that were popping. The press, the mayor, the fire and police chiefs, even kids and teachers from school had all learned of the rescue that day and had come to praise her. "Young lady, please accept this Medal of Valor as a token of our gratitude and esteem," said the mayor, and he gave Orville a new collar with a license that read K9 Hero. What happened to Violet as a result of her actions at the river? How do you think the event at the end of the story makes Violet feel? From that day on, Violet's parents let her fly whenever she wanted, but her mom still made her wear a sweater. So let's talk a little bit more about Violet and her character traits. Remember that we can get to know characters in a story by paying attention to what the characters look like on the outside and what they say, think, and do. Remember, those are external and internal traits. Details in the text and pictures help readers get to know a character's traits and how those traits influence how he or she responds to events or challenges. So I'm going to reread pages 5 and 6 for you, and then I have some questions. Everyone in town knew that Violet Van Winkle was a little different. For starters, she and her parents lived in an odd-looking house next to the junkyard her father managed. And while other girls were playing with dolls and tea sets, Violet played with monkey wrenches and needle-nose pliers. Violet was a mechanical genius. By the time she was 2, she could fix almost any broken appliance in the house. By 4, she could take apart the grandfather clock and completely reassemble it. Since she didn't have any friends aside from her dog Orville, she would spend hours tinkering with things from the yard. Violet's parents were very proud of her, although they weren't too happy the time she put a lawnmower engine on her cousin's tricycle. Thinking about what I just read, it states that Violet is a little different from other people in town. Why is that? Well, we know while other little girls were playing with dolls and tea sets, Violet liked to play with monkey wrenches and needle-nose pliers. It also tells us that she was a mechanical genius and that she was fixing stuff by the time she was 2 years old. So what does this tell us about Violet's character? I think that it's telling us that she is a little different and she's also smart. And it makes me wonder, is she going to be able to fit in easily with those around her? On this page, it says kids at school would see Violet eating lunch alone and make fun of her strange books and greasy coveralls. Claude and Clyde Mulrooney were especially obnoxious. Why? How did the other kids at school act towards Violet? I think that they're kind of mean to her because she's different. She's not interested in the things that they're interested in, and she dresses differently than them. On the way to the air show, we see that Violet comes across an accident. What does she do? Does she just keep flying by so she can make it to the show? Or does she stop to help? Yeah, Yeah, she stops to help and save the Boy Scouts, even though she had somewhere to be. What do Violet's actions tell you about her character? So she stops and saves the Boy Scouts. And I think that her actions say that even though people have been unkind to her and ugly and mean to her because she looks and acts differently from them, I think it shows how kind and caring she really is as a character. And at the end of the story, we can see that it pays off because all of her friends and teachers from her school and the press and the mayor and the fire and the police chief come to praise her for what a great job she did. So even though she missed the air show, it ended up paying off in the long run. So in conclusion, I would say that Violet's external traits that we see on the outside, we see that she wears coveralls. She a lot of times has dirt all over her. We see how she's acting when she's reading her books and she's working on projects instead of doing things like playing with dolls and things like that. And then internally, we can see that she's kind and caring because she had an air show to make, but she still chose to help out those people instead.